the number of global COVID deaths pushes past 100,000, Houston, Texas continues to dodge the worst of this pandemic. Is the fatal surge still coming, or has community-wide social distancing suppressed the casualty count? Meantime, with the national economy choked to a crawl, millions more file jobless claims. Can our government's rescue plan bridge the painful gap between collapse and recovery? I'm Greg Krugen, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it, especially in a time of pandemic. Let's greet them. Starting us off, Bob Price, Associate Editor of Breitbart, Texas. Next up, longtime super neighborhood leader Tamara Bell. In the three spot, well-known columnist and businessman Bill King. Batting cleanup, Charles Blaine, founder of Urban Reform. And closing us out, Tony Diaz, host of Latino Politics and News on KPFT Radio. Like the bloodiest of human wars, every day the casualty numbers rise ever higher. Lives extinguished by a microscopic demon. COVID-19 is hardly the first plague to wreak indiscriminate havoc on humanity. It is, however, the first of its magnitude in the 21st century, a humbling challenge to our scientific and technological hubris. With no vaccine imminent, our only weapon seems to be discipline. The collective will to remain apart and simply wait this lethal virus out. Here in the nation's fourth largest city, that tactic, in combination with the ample space allowing for less population density, has thus far kept the number of fatalities under 100. Remarkable, considering the horrors still underway in Italy and New York. The Kinder Institute estimated the stay-at-home order preserved the lives of more than 4,500 of our neighbors in just the first 2 weeks of forced social distancing. Panel, I'm guessing you all agree what we're doing is working, but how long should it go on? I'm going to start with Bob Price.
You know, this disease has been devastating, particularly to New York City, where they did not practice social distancing early on. They did not lock their people down, and now 7,887 deaths have been reported according to the latest statistics from Johns Hopkins University. That's almost 40% of all the COVID-19 deaths in the world. It's amazing what this thing can do, and it's horrific what's happening in that largest city in the United States. I listened to Governor Cuomo yesterday, and he for the first time, sounded positive about what was happening, in that they finally flattened the curve and is starting to come over the other side. Less people on intubation, less people in ICU, less new cases. So that's a positive sign that maybe they're getting a handle on this. But I think the social distancing and the stay-at-home orders in Texas in particular have been very effective in keeping this from spreading. With less than 100 deaths in the metropolitan area of Houston, that's a big difference between some of the largest cities in this country and the number 3 city.
Tamara Bell, I want to hear what you think. I know you have strong contacts in the community. Is this working?
Yes, it is working. And one of the things that I have to say, I was very impressed at how I saw more of the establishments after last week's show when we talked about one HEB may be doing one thing, but at the other HEB, they're doing something different. Now I've been around to different grocery stores and they're all doing it where they only let so many people in at a time. They keep in a line, making them keep their distance in the line. I was very impressed to see how that spread all around. I mean, I'm seeing HEBs off the Beltway, inside the medical center area, and even on the west side. They are all doing that. And I know that that has a big impact because I've talked to several people who have recovered from COVID-19, who went through it. And I mean of all age groups. I'm talking 60s, 50s, 20s who had this and what they went through. And each of them had a different experience. And praise God, they all recovered that I know, and they did not have to go to the hospital. But they all talked about how they believe they got it. Because one thing about it, absolutely none of them were clear because nobody prior to them getting it told them, hey, I have it. You know, so They know that when it became social distancing and they locked themselves down, they stopped it from spreading because they quarantined themselves at home. But the sustainability of this cannot go on. This cannot last. We've got to do something. And I was happy to hear that another task force as how we get back to work, how we get back started, because we may have to change how we perform, but we cannot not perform. We can't.
Charles Blaine, there are those who think that we haven't reached a tipping point. There are those who believe this week is the tipping point.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we heard that tomorrow, Easter Sunday, is supposed to be the peak. And I think, you look at a lot of these places that you see the heavy caseloads, and you can't help but to notice that the similarity between them is the density. I mean, whether you're looking at Milan, Seattle, New York, Wuhan, a lot of these places, heavy mass transit systems that people did not stop using even after the outbreaks. And you have a lot of multi-generational housing or multi-family housing where you see a lot of these spreads. But we can't continue this much longer. I mean, you have a lot of folks, just take renters, for instance, who may be working with their landlords, but they lost their jobs or were furloughed and have, either no check or limited checks coming in. They had to pay April rent. Their landlord might let them pay it in May, but then that's going to be 2 months rent, plus late fees, plus you got a cable bill, food bill, car bill, all this other stuff that's adding up. And that's going to get so much worse the longer you keep them out of work. So we've got to start reopening sections of the economy. Sure, we can do task force. I'm tired of seeing government come out with task force to tell us how to fix a problem that they created. But if we do task force, let them show us what sections of the economy we can open up, whether it's, businesses by appointment only or things like that. We got to get people back to work, or else we're going to deal with this problem far longer than we expected.
Tony, pick it up there. Take about 30 seconds.
No, I mean, the struggle is real, but I think it's also not healthy to imagine that there's a hard date and a specific deadline that we're going to be given when things will go back to normal, because I'm afraid things will never go back to normal again. And if we're on that delusion, we may get out of this just in time for hurricane season. And unfortunately, I don't think education will ever go back to the way it was. I think some companies are going to realize they don't need a big box, and some people will adapt quickly. We got to go back and get the people who are being left behind because they don't have internet access, they don't have computer literacy. So I think we really need to talk about transitions, because even if we need money, folks need their jobs, but even if tomorrow, let's say they opened restaurants again, like they tried to make it like they used to be, I don't know if people have money or if they'd even feel comfortable going into that. So I think we need to be thinking more about a transition and helping people prepare for this new era, which is here. It's not in theory, it's here.
Close us out, Bill King.
Well, the idea of quarantine is an ancient remedy. We know all the way back to biblical times, there's references to leper colonies. I mean, this is a tactic that we know that works. But to say that we have any idea how well it's working or what parts of it are working is complete and utter hubris. I'm particularly irritated about the Rice study or the Kinder study that you mentioned. I went and looked at the assumptions. They assumed that a third of the Houston region will get the disease in the first wave. That is 100 times higher than any infection rate any place in the world. Look, folks, in Italy, where this has been a terrible disease, it is less than 0.5% of the people that were confirmed to have the disease. 99% of the people in Italy never got this disease. And yet we're imposing incredible hardships on that 99% they're not getting it. And by the way, this is not just financial. I talked to a family yesterday who are skipping going, the lady is a cancer survivor. She's supposed to be going to her oncologist once a month. They've closed down those appointments. She can't go to her oncologist, and they're worried to death that her cancer is going to revive. There are all sorts of consequences.
Bill, I've got to stop you there. We've got to go to break. Up next on this Easter morning, words of comfort and encouragement from the spiritual leader of 1.7 million Houston area Catholics. Our conversation with Archbishop Cardinal Daniel DiNardo after the break. Your Eminence, here in my parish and across the diocese, we have celebrated Mass from our homes via the internet. But this is Holy Week. What guidance do you have for the faithful as we approach the holiest of days, Easter Sunday?
Pray for those who are in medicine, doctors, first responders. I would also gather your family together, particularly on Easter Sunday. And as you do a family meal, to say some intense prayers for our growth in faith in this local church in Galveston, Houston, and throughout the area. People of Texas here are very strong in their faith, whatever may be their religious affiliation. And it is that faith together, I think, that will serve as an extreme purpose of making us go through this and come out brilliantly. So if Easter is Jesus' victory, Easter is also Jesus' victory in us. Pray that that takes place.
Your Eminence, while you are a cardinal at your most fundamental level, you are a priest. How important is faith during this crisis? What can you say to those who feel this contagion may be challenging their faith, especially if they have someone who's sick or they lose someone?
Yes, I am a priest and always will be one. It's particularly difficult to see people suffering, and faith is both necessary and also a challenge. I look, for instance, to the doctors and the medical people. I have spoken to them in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and they themselves need the prayers and consolation of people towards them because they're doing such incredible work and they're so resilient and so firm in their determination. To my mind, I see them working, and that help builds me up in faith. And then I think it is important as a priest to give comfort to those, particularly those who are suffering because of a family member suffering or because they have lost a loved one. This is just sorrow on sorrow. And yet it is in those moments that our faith comes so strong.
Still ahead, should fear of coronavirus trigger compassionate release of those awaiting trial for serious crimes? Our panel is set to debate after the break. Welcome back. Amid this pandemic, a battle is raging here in our community over the 7,000 plus inmates currently under lock and key in the Harris County Jail. The county's elected chief executive, Judge Lena Hidalgo, has pushed hard to release as many inmates as possible, contending the COVID-19 virus poses a particularly dangerous threat to both prisoners and detention officers living and working in close quarters. But others say unleashing criminal defendants, many of whom have demonstrated social irresponsibility, poses an unnecessary danger to the public and to police officers already under heavy stress from the contagion. Tuesday, 9 Republican lawmakers representing more than 2 million residents filed legal action in federal court opposing release of any felony defendants, suggesting Hidalgo's proposal would trigger a crime wave. I want to go back to Bill King. I cut you off, wanted to let you complete your thought and give us your thoughts on the jail situation.
Well, I think, again, this is one of those things that we don't know what the consequences of these actions are going to be. Like, I'm not in favor of nonviolent people being kept in jail because they can't make bail. You know, whether this, before this, I mean, that should never take place. And we do a lot of that. But, you know, you start turning loose violent criminals, we have no idea what the effect that's going to be. You know, there's a lot of homeless, mentally ill people in the jail. We turn all those people out. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do during this crisis? Are they going to social distance? In some cases, that might be the best place for them. You know, once again, we're making decisions without data, on the fly. And I just think we've got to really slow down and take a serious look at what are the unintended consequences of all these policies we're pushing through right now.
Tony, you've been a supporter of Lena Hidalgo. Do you back her on this call?
Well, I do, but I think if people don't agree with her and she appeals to humanitarian reasons, how about legal reasons? In Dallas, prisoners have joined a federal lawsuit against the prison system demanding that 50-year-olds be released. Some of the prisoners in that lawsuit are already sick. In Dallas, you've got prisoners who have COVID-19. You've got guards who have COVID-19. The numbers are even higher here in Harris County. with the number of prisoners that are sick and the number of guards and staff members who are sick as well. I think the other part too is this is a tough decision. Obviously, there's no clear right answer. And I think part of it too is that, you know, some stereotypes are running wild. I don't think people should be saying that. There's memes I've seen on social media that say that people get robbed and the police say, we can't arrest anybody. No, bad guys, you're gonna get busted if you're doing that now. Democrats too, though, you need to scrutinize everyone who you help and pretend there's a right winger breathing over your neck, because this is not only going to come back to haunt you. We don't want these bad guys to do bad things again. Save some lives and keep order.
Tamara Bell, it's not as if these prisoners are released, they won't face a COVID risk even in the general public. What's your take on this?
Look, there are methods and there are things that they can use to disinfect that prison. And if they got to do it on a daily, then they do it on a daily. In hospitals where people have COVID-19, they disinfect the room so that the next people that come in behind them, there are things that they can do. There are precautionary measures before they just make this kind of decision. I agree with what Bill said about if you're in there because you can't make bail and you've done some hot checks or whatever, and it's a non-violent and it's something that they can come back and get you for, I don't think you should stay in jail for that. Or if you got stopped and your tag light was out or something, you didn't have insurance, I don't think you should be stuck in a jail like that. But to say that you are going to let out violent criminals because they're scared of getting COVID-19, hell, I'm scared of getting COVID-19. I'm worried about that. That doesn't change, what I have to do every day. We all have that fear. Everybody has that fear. This needs to be done with some serious consequences and action looked at it. The diversion center that they have at Harris County only has so many beds in it. And like Bill said, some of the people that are in there because they have mental ill problems. Where are they going to go? Where are they going to go? If you let these people out, what direction? I mean, there has to be a method for your ability to follow them and tell them so that you'll know where they are, because the crime rates are up. Burglary is up high. They had a guy a father shot his 19-year-old son last night. They're both in the hospital because the 19-year-old had beat him up so bad. So you have domestic violence going up. So, I mean, there's a lot of consequences to this action. And before you make a decision like this on the fly, there needs to be other avenues looked at. What can we do to minimize the exposure while they're there? And I don't think that's being done. I don't.
Bob Price, pick it up right there. Take about 30, 45 seconds.
Well, let me see if we got this right. So the average Houstonian has to stay at home, but we're going to let the criminals out to walk the streets and go where they want, even though they were already in the ultimate stay-at-home order. So the administrative judge for the district courts in Harris County slapped Judge Hidalgo down pretty harshly. They voided her order. They said she's got no business. This is purely the jurisdiction of the state district courts. The judge clearly overstepped her bounds on this issue, and we need to leave the criminals in jail. There's ways. If you bring new inmates into the jail, you segregate them for 14 days. If you get sick people, you put them over to the hospital. The population of the jail is down enough already that they can create segregation areas for people that are known to be healthy and keep them away from everybody else.
Let me slide in there. Final 30 seconds. Charles Blaine.
If the county can't maintain the health and welfare of a population that it completely controls, then why should we think that it can maintain our health and welfare? I think if you look at this, the problem here is that they want to release folks who are charged with crimes like burglary. And we know that economic factors are the primary cause for recidivism. So you're letting these people out when in a crushed job market, they would have a hard time finding a job in a regular job market. So they don't really have many prospects. What do you think that they're going to do when they get back out? So she's trying to push through kind of a bail reform light under the guise of a crisis and call it public health while she's damaging public safety. And so I don't think citizens should be okay with that.
Still ahead, more on the jail release controversy as we go one-on-one with Houston's top cop, Chief Art Acevedo. So stay with us. Welcome back. Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo makes no bones about it. Releasing inmates facing felony charges is bad news for his officers, and even worse news for the general public he's sworn to protect.
So the issue of compassionate release, bail bond reform, the felony litigation that's been filed, it's all been intermixed, and I think that people are confusing what the issues are. First, let's start off with compassionate release. I don't think anyone in their right mind would be against truly compassionate release based on an individual case-by-case assessment of the person's risk, of the person's health, an assessment to make sure that they haven't already been infected, because let's face it, people that are in jail are not the most law-abiding, and certainly they're not going to be engaged in social distancing. And then the other piece is the low bails that some of these judges are now giving, $10 bail for domestic violence, felony domestic violence, PR bonds for murder. Listen, that doesn't pass the smell test nor the good judgment test, and the people of Houston need to have a judiciary that focuses on justice with a victim-centered approach, a public safety approach first and foremost, and secondarily, we look at restorative justice and trying to help people that seem to be worthy of second chances. But we have cases time and again where people are in and out on personal bonds, extremely low bonds, despite the fact that they have a history of violence and despite the fact that they have no business being out running around victimizing them. To the extent that just this week, just last week, I was advised of one case where a person kept just not even showing up in court, making a mockery out of the court, and within 3 days of being let out on a personal bond, again, ended up committing a sexual assault. So let's be thoughtful. Let's stay engaged. We need this community to know, be alert, because what's coming after this pandemic potentially could be a crime wave with the economic impact that we're about to see, and we should not take that lightly, and we should get our criminal justice system attuned, in tune, and aligned on focusing on public safety now and not after that wave that's probably going to come hits.
When we come back, presidential politics in a time of coronavirus. After what looks like a losing effort in Wisconsin, Senator Bernie Sanders throws in the towel. Our panel attacks the topic after the break. Back. In the state of Wisconsin this week, voters literally risked their lives to exercise their democratic right. On the surface, that's pretty inspiring, but it should never have happened in the middle of a pandemic. Efforts to postpone the primary and extend the deadline for mail-in ballots were knocked down by Republican court challenges. So, with a chronic shortage of election workers forcing a drastic reduction in polling sites, Wisconsiners courageously queued up to cast their ballots, risking infection to support their democracy. And oh, by the way, one-time Democratic frontrunner Bernie Sanders called it quits, ensuring Joe Biden will face Donald Trump in the fall. I'm going to start with Tony Diaz. What's your point, Tony?
Oh, my goodness. That was a really disappointing example in Wisconsin of bipartisan politics at its worst, because it looks like Republicans were trying to make it hard for people to vote and risk COVID-19 in order to protect a Supreme Court seat that was really highly contested. And that's basically a set of power that they've used to protect a lot of policies that have been challenged in court. As far as Bernie bowing out goes, too, I think Biden supporters need to stop fretting and start campaigning. They're worried about Bernie supporters jumping over. They need to start campaigning hard right now to get young voters on board, the Latino vote more deeply involved with them. And, you know, I got to commend Bernie, because especially if you saw what's happening in Wisconsin, it's going to be very hard to get people out to vote. And right now, the only thing making news is COVID-19, not anybody's platforms. So I think this is really important for people to stay engaged. And as far as Wisconsin goes, we're going to see the results of the election and who got COVID-19 because of this. And we should never forget that happened.
Bob Price, Republicans taking a lot of heat on this issue. Is it justified?
Well, you know, back to the Democrats, Joe Biden, as it was in the beginning, Joe Biden is the presumptive nominee now, and we move forward to see the battle between him and Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders, however, has dragged Biden's position strongly to the left, and that's going to make it even easier, I think, for the incumbent president to maintain his seat in power. The Wisconsin primary, you know, I wish that the people hadn't been exposed to that. They came out and voted. You know, God bless them for doing that, and so pray for their safety and hope that everyone's okay. But the real battle has begun now, and the interesting thing in this is Joe's former boss, Barack Obama, has failed even now to endorse him to be president of the United States. I think that says a lot when the guy that you worked the most closely with for 8 years, at a time before the North Carolina primary where he could have made a huge difference in the outcome, refused to get involved in this race.
Tamara Bell, back to Wisconsin. With so few polling places, particularly in Milwaukee, they say a lot of African-American voters were disenfranchised by the decision to go ahead with the primary.
Yes, that was what the Republicans in Wisconsin had hoped would happen. But when you see across the country the amount of African Americans that are dying from this, in Illinois, African Americans make up 13% of the state of Illinois population. They're 70% of the fatalities of COVID-19. So when you talk, and in Detroit, they have a high rate. So when it was African Americans in Wisconsin saw it, and they didn't want to take that risk, so you're going to have a low turnout because of that. And you don't know how many people were already on quarantine because they were working at a job or at a grocery store or whatever where somebody had it. So that does not surprise me. But let's get back to what he said about Barack Obama. I mean, what Biden needs to show to be president of the USA is that he can carry his own water. Sure, Obama will eventually endorse him, but he don't need to come out and endorse him now. Biden is doing what he's doing on his own. Bernie Sanders got out of the race because of Biden, not because of Obama. And this is what you need to do to show you are the leader. You don't need to wait for somebody to come and carry their coattail for you to come in. So Obama is doing the right thing and Biden is doing the right thing, showing he can stand up on his own.
Charles Blaine, a lot on the table there. What is your point?
Yeah, I mean, I think we keep blaming the Republicans in Wisconsin, but it's the Democratic state governor who didn't decide in advance to move the election, similarly to how Governor Abbott moved the election, our runoff election, to the summer. So, we could have dealt with this on the front end, but now the courts had to deal with it on the back end. But to the Bernie Biden situation, I think Bob makes a great point that Bernie did a great job moving Biden to the left, and he moved the party to the left, so far to the left that I don't know the American public can find alignment with that. And I think even though they moved to the left, you still have a large portion of the base who were Bernie supporters who aren't coming over. I mean, they were tweeting all week how upset they were about this and how they're not voting for Joe Biden and how nobody's voting for Joe Biden. So I really don't see how they think this is a winning strategy.
Bill King, it's independent, moderate voters like you who will be the swing voters in the fall. How do you like this Biden-Trump matchup?
Well, I think what went on in Wisconsin was ridiculous. They should have postponed it. And I think the Republicans were playing a game. They're trying to protect that Supreme Court position, as Tony suggested. And I think that's going to end up hurting them in the fall. One thing about politics is whatever you think is going to happen, there's all these events that intervene. I mean, who dreamed that a pandemic would become the main issue in the presidential campaign? And you see it's becoming highly politicized. People that tend to be sort of doubters of the virus or Trump supporters, and people that are hair on fire, the world's ending, tend to be Democrats. And so it's dividing how we view a medical issue is being tainted by our partisan leanings. I don't think we know how this is going to play out right now. Right now, it's clearly hurting Trump in the polling. But if we end up coming out the other side, typically speaking, the guy that's in charge in the middle of a crisis gets a bump. So we'll have to wait and see.
Okay. Up next, a presidential impeachment and now a deadly pandemic. Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia speaks out on the latest crisis that's just ahead, so stay with us. Welcome back. With another record-busting week of jobless claims, America's most vulnerable communities are facing extremely difficult times. Such is the case for the 29th Congressional District, represented by Sylvia Garcia.
We've already passed 3 different packages, and of course, it's not enough. We see unemployment increase to a level that we've never, ever seen it before in this country, more than the Great Depression in Texas. We've had more applications, I think, this last week than we'd had in the entire year before. So again, people are hurting, so we've got to make sure that people are taken care of. But it's not just the people that lost jobs, but people that have no jobs. So I worry about poor people that can't, even when we do get the economy back, may not be able to go back because the companies are beginning to lay off. The companies will restructure. It'll be something we ease in back into. So I won't be happy until we make sure that everyone that needs a test can get one so that they can feel comfortable going back to work. And secondly, that we put everybody back to where they were before the virus and that no one has suffered any more than they had to, because again, the priority for everyone is having food on their table, making sure their kids get back to school, and that they have a job. Those are the three things we have to focus on. We've got to put people first.
Still ahead, fear and uncertainty caused by the coronavirus has triggered an unprecedented run on guns. Are record-breaking sales justified or a knee-jerk reaction? Welcome back. Toilet paper and firearms. As soon as this pandemic turned critical, Americans began stockpiling both. Analysts call the hoarding of both irrational. After all, supplies of TP are plentiful, and frankly, this country is already armed to the teeth. That said, there were 3.7 million background checks for gun sales in the month of March, a new record. On the 31st, Americans bought more than 200,000 firearms in a single day. Now, of course, all of this is possible because our government has declared that gun retail establishments are essential businesses. I'm going to go to Bill King. What's your thought on this, Bill?
Well, look, we've reached this hysterical level about this in this country. And look, I understand it's frightening. You see people dying. But I would encourage everybody to continue to look at the actual data. That's the only way that you can get grounded on this. And let me just give you a couple statistics. Number one, no place in the world has the infection rate exceeded more than 0.3%. Even in the worst places, 99.7% of the people were never infected by this disease. There are about 2.9 million people that die in the United States every year. We're talking about maybe 60,000 people dying from this. The truth there is that the vast majority of people will die from something other than this in the United States this year. Many more people will die of cancer. Many more people will die of smoking. And right now, it looks like about the same number are probably going to die from the flu. Look at the data and don't become hysterical about this threat.
Bob Price, I got to ask you, are gun stores, gun retailers, a vital establishment in this, I guess, pandemic?
Well, certainly they are. And I think the record number of gun sales that's going on is symptomatic of the fact that people are not confident that the government is going to be there to protect them. And that's the main reason for the Second Amendment to exist in the first place, is so that people can protect themselves at a time when law enforcement cannot. We've seen time and time again in this country where natural disasters happen and other things happen that create temporary lawlessness, and the only thing the person has to protect themselves is the individually owned firearm. That is what stands between us and chaos in this country. So yes, I agree with Bill. You've got to watch the statistics and don't be acting super irrational, but it is a symptom that people are not confident that this government can protect us, and that's why we have to protect ourselves.
Tony, at some point you're going to go back in the classroom. How are you going to explain to future generations all of this TP and firearm purchasing?
Well, it's going to be pretty simple. Right now we can see it. Governor Cuomo of New York inspires confidence. The President of the United States inspires fear and confusion. And he keeps using the metaphor of that we're at war. He's creating a civil war, okay? Because you're mentioning one business that is thriving. People are now competing state by state for ventilators, for protective gear. I think it is really a moment where we have to trust government the most. And this is going to reveal if we trust government now or not. And I think the problem becomes that Donald Trump is revealing all of his weaknesses right now. And also, when you hear about him trying to pull through this, I'm really disappointed in him not being straight up and more open. And I can see it every day. You got people like Cuomo that tell us the hard truths and are backed up by facts, and you got Trump's chaos. I think that's what I'm going to tell them. And we're going to all study this moment in history. We're going to have to pull together through this, and I think we're going to have to elect a new president.
Charles Blaine, I'm guessing you don't think the new firearms purchasers or the old firearms purchasers are being hysterical at all.
I don't think so, but to Tony's point, competition is good. That is the reason that we have, students at Rice University stepping up and creating ventilators for lower cost than we'd be seeing elsewhere. That's the reason that we see more competition in the market now. We're being able to we're more equipped to handle this than we are in the beginning. But I don't think that the run on firearms is irrational. I mean, we're in a situation where we may be facing, very tough economic times, and I can see why people would be concerned about keeping themselves safe. We were just talking about how the local government wants to release a bunch of nonviolent criminals, so people are concerned. And so but what is frustrating is that, they're telling us we can't go to the parks that we pay for, or they mistakenly think that they can tell us we can't go to church on Easter, but they're leaving other businesses like liquor stores open. That shows a lot of what the direction that they want things to go in. And yes, I understand there's an argument that, folks who are suffering from alcoholism need access to alcohol during things like this, but it is absolutely ridiculous that you're going to tell us we can't do things like go to church, but you're going to leave establishments like that open.
Okay, tomorrow, close this out. A hard 30 seconds here.
Listen, first off, the run on the ventilators, I have a problem with that. There's a company called Respironics. You all need to check it out. They have ventilators stored in storehouses. The reason New York is in the scenario that they're in, even though you just gave Cuomo his props, is because New York sold their ventilators at a surplus sale years ago, and that's why they're low on them. But Respironics, their business is down because they're not selling ventilators, and they're one of the #1 ventilator companies on the planet. So I do believe that there is some hysteria in this, and I agree with what Bill is saying. When you look at the data, people need to be realistic about this. When Obama was president, he had the swine flu, he had Ebola, he had H1N1. We didn't shut down the markets, we didn't shut down. People did die, but we still went on because that was the nature of the business. I think that we need to bag this up and look again, and maybe they need the guns, maybe they don't. But I knew one thing, we need to get it together, and we need to do it quickly.
Leaving it there, still ahead as Houston braces for a surge of COVID patients. We talk to a critical care doctor in the thick of the fight. Don't go away. What's your point? We'll be right back. Welcome back. For Houstonians suffering severe cases of COVID-19, the difference between life and death will be access to highly skilled doctors and nurses equipped with intensive care units and ventilators. This week, we traveled into the heart of the Texas Med Center to learn from a critical care physician exactly what's taking place on the front lines. As Houston healthcare workers move to and from the ongoing battle with COVID-19, Fox 26 News spoke with the equivalent of a frontline general in the thick of the fight. Dr. Faisal Masood is director of critical care at Houston Methodist Hospital and is caring for dozens of patients seriously ill with coronavirus.
I'm amazed and blown away by the spirit of Texas in Houston. They have really stepped up. The nurses are volunteering to work. The doctors are volunteering to work. I really have actually a pool of people who want to work and do in these most critically ill patients.
Dr. Masood says Methodist is expanding to 300 ICU beds across the entire system in anticipation of a potential surge. Currently, 75 of those beds are occupied with mostly critically ill patients suffering from COVID-19.
They get admitted to ICU. We do a lot of treatment to them to stabilize them. Unfortunately, a lot of them are going on the ventilators. And then it's a whole different cascade of therapies.
And unlike the COVID-19 epicenters of Italy and Wuhan, Masood says a heavy percentage of Houston area COVID patients are middle-aged or younger.
Almost 42% and above. I'm seeing less than 50 years of age. Three most common things. They are diabetic, they are hypertensive, and they are very overweight. Those are the three more common things I'm seeing in younger patient population. What it tells me is nobody is out of the risk pool.
Methodist says if the COVID surge intensifies, plans are in place to expand ICU capacity even further. Meantime, a few miles away at NRG, work continues on a safety net defense to an even more serious scenario, a so-called emergency shelter constructed by the county to shield med center hospitals from becoming overwhelmed. Dr. Masood says what we do in our homes and our neighborhoods will determine whether the pop-up facility is idle or full.
My slogan is, this is not vacation. You help us, let us help you and take care of you, because we are putting ourselves and our families online. You are our family, our extended family.
Up next on this Easter morning, people helping people in the time of coronavirus. A story of faith and action coming your way, so stick around. Welcome back. As COVID-19 continues to claim lives across the country, it is also destroying livelihoods, millions of them, with tens of thousands of Houstonians already enduring a coronavirus pink slip. When the wages stop, despair can quickly roll in for families living paycheck to paycheck. Yet not far from my home in Houston's southwest side, a local congregation is stepping into the breach, stepping up to put food on empty tables. On Houston's southwest side, the need is always there.
The groceries that they need in order to be able to sustain and to fill in those gaps.
And yet, in this time of coronavirus, it has grown much, much greater.
There are a lot of people out here that are just struggling to try to make it to week now.
Jobs gone, and a collective sense of security with them.
A large number of the members and people in our community are people that work in the service industry, so they're not working right now.
But for Reverend James Lee of Bethel Heavenly Hands, the path is clear to walk the walk.
These times right now is where we get to be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ.
Since the COVID came, the folks at Bethel Family Baptist have increased food distribution from once to 3 times a week. It has been answered with 3 times the gratitude from families facing hard choices, uncertain futures.
Keep food on my table.
Gracias por los alimentos.
We are told that since the coronavirus began escalating here in Houston, the lines for food here at Bethel have quadrupled. On this morning, amid the crippling pandemic, those in need wait patiently car after car, at least 1,500 in total. Here they can fill their pantry, if not their bank account.
I'm not working, so that right there just helps me out with the food.
I'm just praying for all of us, especially those with kids, you know.
Trunk by trunk, volunteers load the sustenance as safely as they can, given the contagion. For Pastor Lee, fully engaged in the battle to be his brother's keeper, the needs moving forward are simple: time, treasure, and most of all, willing hands.
The times get tougher when money gets tight, when you have to go ahead and help your brother and help your neighbor. That's when we have to come together as a Christian community and just serve. And that's all we're doing here. We're just serving the needs.
In the space of just 48 hours, the giving and the getting will begin again. Many hurting, others helping as best they can.
Needed it. Thank God for it.
Caring in the time of coronavirus.